The Orioles offense absolutely exploded at Fenway Park on Monday night. 14 runs for the Orioles, and they pick up a game one victory in Boston against the Red Sox. I'll recap how the offense did it all, take a look at Jordan Lyles' struggles, and talk about how Keegan Akin's season has come to an end, all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Tuesday, September 27th, 2022, and welcome back in to the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we're going to recap an incredible performance by the Orioles offense. Just dominant in Boston on Monday night to win game one of a four-game series. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from that offensive explosion. Then we'll take a look at the pitching side on Monday night because Jordan Lyles only pitched 2 innings before having to come out after the long rain delay, but he did not look good and he did not look right on the mound for the Orioles. We'll talk about what that means for Lyles and the O's over their final few games of this season. And then we'll take a look at the O's roster move on Monday as they brought up Logan Gillespie and sent Keegan Akin down to AAA, effectively ending his season. We'll take a look at what was a wild ride for Keegan Akin, so good in the first half and so bad in the second half of the season. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast. Before we get there, just did want to thank you for making Locked On Orioles your first podcast listen of the day. We're free and available on all podcast listening platforms Monday through Friday. You got brand new episodes out of the podcast. Make sure to check us out on YouTube as well. Like, comment, and subscribe right here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. We thank you so much for watching, making Locked On Orioles your first podcast listen of the day. And for your first listen today, let's start with a big Orioles win that took a long time. Final score, Orioles 14, Red Sox 8 on Monday night at Fenway Park. Orioles taking game one of a 4-game series. And with the victory, the O's get themselves to 80-83 on the season. They are 1 win away from at least wrapping up a 500 season, just 2 wins away from clinching a winning season here in 2022. The only other wildcard team that played was the Toronto Blue Jays on Monday night, a 3-2 walk-off win over the Yankees in 10 innings. There was actually only 4 Major League Baseball games on Monday night. So the Orioles remain 6.5 back of the Blue Jays. They are now just 4 back of the Rays and 3.5 back of the Seattle Mariners heading into play on Tuesday. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles' 14-8 victory over the Red Sox. And the first thing you need to know is that Gunnar Henderson hit the most impressive home run that I've maybe ever seen an Orioles hitter just absolutely smash in this ball game. And listen, Gunnar had a good day. He worked 3 walks in this game as well, but he put 1 ball in play, 3 walks, a strikeout, and an absolute monstrous 2-run homer in this game. He hit it in the 6th inning to dead center field over the big wall at Fenway Park. 111.1 miles per hour off the bat, traveled 428 feet to dead center field for a 2-run shot from Gunnar Henderson. It was incredible. I mean, the crack of the bat, if you haven't seen it, go watch the video. It's on our @LockedOnOrioles Twitter page. The sound of the crack of the bat in a fairly empty Fenway Park was unreal to see Henderson just crush that 2-run bomb in the 6th inning. And it was even bigger because he was having good plate appearances that night. He'd already worked a few walks. As I mentioned, he walked 3 times. But that home run broke him out of his first slump of his major league career. He was 0 for his last 16, was Henderson, before that 2-run homer in the 6th inning. And what a way to break out of a slump. This kid is special. He keeps doing just incredible things on the baseball field. Second thing you need to know from this one, speaking of home runs, Orioles outfielder Anthony Santander had a 2-homer game in this one. And finally, the Orioles won a game in which Santander homered twice. The Orioles were 0-8 in Santander's career when he hit 2 home runs in a game, including the crazy 11-10 loss to the Astros on Saturday night. Of course, Santander's second homer was a 2-run shot in the 8th that gave the O's a 9-7 lead that they just couldn't hold in the top of the 9th. And in this game, they finally figure out how to win somehow, some way, when Santander goes deep twice in a game. And he had a big game overall in this one, hit a couple other balls hard as well. The 2 for 6 with the 2 home runs and the 3 RBIs for Anthony Santander, who really crushed his first home run in the 6th inning, 105.5 miles per hour off the bat, 403 feet for a solo homer. His second one wasn't exactly crushed. That was in the 7th inning. Both home runs came from the left side of the plate. Second homer, just 97.6 miles per hour off the bat, just 365 feet. Had an expected batting average of just 300, according to StatCast, but he wrapped it around that pesky pole for a 2-run homer in the 7th that gave the Orioles a 13-5 lead at the time. Another big day for Santander, who was the first Oriole hitter this year to eclipse 30 home runs. He hits number 30 and 31 at Fenway Park on Monday night. Just a big, big season for Santander. And the third thing you need to know from this one is that the Orioles offense, just in general, they just exploded in this game against the Red Sox. 14 runs on 14 hits in this game. The 5 homers tied a season high for the Orioles. They drew 8 walks in this game, which was second best of the year. They did walk 10 times in a game against the Yankees in April, but the 8 walks I will take. And everybody chipped in this game. Cedric Mullins had a great start to this game, led off the game with a home run, then had a 2-run triple in the 2nd inning. He was halfway to the cycle through 2 innings, and he had the 2 hard parts out of the way. Adley Rutschman had a single and a walk. We talked about Santander. Ryan Mountcastle, 0 for 2, but he draws 3 walks in this game. Mentioned Henderson with the homer and the 3 walks. Austin Hayes, a 2 for 5 with a single and a home run. His solo shot in the 8th put the O's up 14-8, his 16th of the season. He's starting to come around and hit much, much better over the past week or so. Rougned Odor with a 2 for 5, a double, a single, and an RBI. Kyle Stowers had a big day. How about 3 for 5 with a triple and 2 ribbies and 3 hard hit balls? And even Jorge Mateo, 1 for 4, a double, a walk, an RBI in this game. Everybody up and down the lineup, 1 through 9, contributed for the Orioles. It was just fun to watch this offense again come together here after all these offensive struggles in September. Fourth thing you need to know from the Orioles' 14-8 victory is that Rougned Odor is just a deeply hilarious player to watch. Now, we talked about on Monday's episode how Odor had a huge weekend against the Astros, went 6 for 12 in the 4-game series against Houston, had clutch hit after clutch hit, tied the game twice in the 8th and the 10th in that Sunday extra innings loss. And he continued to have big hits in this game. 2 for 5, had a double, had an RBI single as well in this game in the 5th inning. And he was hitting the ball well. And then came the 7th inning when things just went completely the other direction for Rougned Odor, like they seem to do. He'll have big games, he'll have bad games, and then he'll have games like this where he does great stuff and also just makes boneheaded plays in the field or just does boneheaded things as a base runner or in the batter's box. And that's what we saw on Monday night. So he has the 2 hits. He continues to swing his hot bat, and he had made a couple of good plays, turned a couple of great double plays, playing second base. And then the 7th inning comes, and I just have no idea what happened. So after Spenser Watkins got the first out in the 7th inning, JD Martinez rockets a ball off of the green monster in left field. Kyle Stowers plays it perfectly, throws it in on one hop, perfect strike to Rougned Odor. They've got Martinez out by 5 or 6 steps. It looked like that old David Ortiz play at second base at Fenway when J.J. Hardy was there waiting for him with the tag. And Odor just doesn't put the tag down. He's just waiting and waiting for Martinez. And JD Martinez just slides under Odor's glove in safely for a double. So what should have been an out ends up extending the inning. Then the Orioles make a pitching change. Gillespie comes in, and off the bat of Tristan Casas, ground ball to Odor. He charges, goes to his right, and then makes a horrendous one-hop throw over to Mountcastle when he had plenty of time to just set his feet or lob it over there. He spikes it in the dirt. Mountcastle can't pick it out. That continues the inning. 2 plays that should have been outs, and the inning should have been over. And instead, the next batter, Rob Refsnyder, hits a 3-run homer, and all of a sudden the O's are sweating again. That made it a 13-8 game. In the 7th, there was only 1 out. The Red Sox were kind of still hanging around at that point. And he just gives away outs. But you got to give him credit with how he's hit over the last week. He's just done this all year. He's just a hilarious player to watch. It's fun at times. It's not fun at times, but he keeps you guessing and he keeps you on your toes. Brooke Notodor certainly keeps you excited. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from this one, got to shout out the 2 pitchers after Jordan Lyles. Now, Jordan Lyles started this game, didn't look great through 2 innings, and then there was a pretty long rain delay, and almost an hour-and-a-half rain delay in this game that forced the game to end after midnight Eastern time. So because of that, Lyles had to leave the game, as did Red Sox starter Connor Newcomb, who had allowed 5 runs in his 2 innings. So the Orioles went to the bullpen, and the easy choice was Spenser Watkins. He hadn't pitched in almost 2 weeks between AAA and the majors, was recalled over the weekend, but did not pitch. So he was fresh and ready to go. And although it wasn't pretty for Watkins, he helped save the bullpen in this game. 4 1/3 innings pitched in relief, 4 runs on 8 hits, 2 Ks and 2 walks. He threw 82 pitches out of the Oriole bullpen. And again, on 82 pitches, you would have liked him to go more than 4 1/3, get more than 13 outs, but he got 13 outs. And not a lot of them were high leverage because the Orioles scored so many runs. They kept sending Watkins back out there, despite the fact that the Red Sox were hitting him hard in this game. And when he finally just ran out of gas, the Orioles went to Logan Gillespie, who they had recalled to the roster on Monday after optioning Keegan Akin to AAA. We'll get to that in a second as well. And Gillespie just finishes out this game. He goes 2 2/3 in relief, allowing 2 runs, 1 earned on 2 hits, 2 Ks, no walks, and a homer. And it took him just 29 pitches to get the final 8 outs of this game. And he, again, like Watkins, did get hit hard, 5 hard hit balls against him. But you get Spenser Watkins and Logan Gillespie to combine for 7 innings of relief. And yeah, they gave up 6 runs, but that was okay because you had scored 14 as an offense. Shout out to those 2 guys. I mean, there's a chance that both of them get optioned to AAA today because, you know, they're going to be down. The O's bullpen still isn't super rested, and they have a chance to bring up 2 potentially other relievers to join this bullpen. Like a guy like, at least I would think Gillespie gets optioned, and we see a guy like Bo Sulser. But shout out to those 2 guys for really saving the Oriole pitching, because that rain delay definitely made it tough to get through this game. But even if there hadn't been a rain delay on Monday night, the Orioles may have still had an issue getting through this game pitching-wise, because Jordan Lyles threw his 2 innings and then came out and the rain came and he had to leave the game. But he might have come out of the game early anyway, because he did not look good. The stuff did not look good. The velo was down. It was kind of concerning from Jordan Lyles. So coming up next, we'll dive into how he looked on the mound on Monday night and what it means for the tail end of this Orioles season for Lyles and for this ball club. But first, got to tell you about BetOnline.net, because we're coming down to the end of the wire here in the Major League Baseball season. 8 days left in the season, and BetOnline is your #1 source for all your baseball betting action, not just through the regular season, but throughout the postseason in October as well. But as you know, it's not just baseball right now. We are full-fledged into football season. And you can find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, in-depth articles, and analysis on every game out there. On the college side, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. On the NFL side, Thursday, Sunday, and Monday. Get all the lines, all the odds you need for football season here this fall. They've got live betting, up-to-the-minute scores for every sport out there, not just football, not just baseball. And you can check on all your favorite games and events throughout the week. So head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. So the Orioles offense erupts for 14 runs on Monday night, winning game 1 of 4 at Fenway Park against the Red Sox with just over a week to go in this season, keeping them alive in the wild card race, just 3.5 games back now of the Mariners. But on the pitching side for the Orioles, we talked about how Spenser Watkins and Logan Gillespie really saved the day, combined to throw 7 innings out of the bullpen and just mop things up and keep the Orioles in the lead and help them win this game. And they had to do it because there was a 90-minute rain delay after Jordan Lyles, the starter, had pitched only 2 innings. He's got to come out there no matter how he's pitching. But he wasn't pitching well. And if there wasn't a rain delay in this game on Monday, he may not have lasted much longer than those 2 innings he threw. Now, his final line 2 innings, 2 runs on 5 hits, no strikeouts, 1 walk, and a home run allowed. And he threw 37 pitches through 2 innings. Jordan Lyles allowed 6 hard hit balls in just 2 innings of work in this game. For comparison, Spenser Watkins got hit pretty hard. He allowed 6 hard hit balls in the 4 1/3 innings that he pitched. It was not good from Jordan Lyles. And it wasn't just the hard contact. It was erratic command. It was velocity down. I mean, he's lucky he only gave up the 2 runs. He did allow a runner in scoring position in the first inning, but got out of it with a 0. And then the second inning, leadoff homer from JD Martinez, loads the bases, a run scores, and he has to get an incredible double play that was started by Rougned Odor with the bases loaded and 1 out just to get out of that inning. The O's had a 5-2 lead after 2. He gets the double play to end the inning, and then the rains come, and you get that long rain delay, and he comes out of the game. But it was not looking good for Jordan Lyles. I mean, we're talking about fastball velocity sitting 88 to 89. I mean, he was average 89.7 on the night, but it was much lower in that second inning of work. He threw a fastball as slow as 88.1 miles per hour in that game. His season average, 91.8 miles per hour on the fastball. That is not what you want. Velocity dropping over 2 miles per hour on your 4-seam fastball. That is concerning for Jordan Lyles. And the stuff wasn't crisp. He did not get any swings and misses on the 15 swings against him in his 2 innings of work. I mean, he mixed his stuff. He did use all 6 of his pitches at least once in the 37 pitches he threw, but just nothing was there for him. And it really reminded me of the Jordan Lyles we saw back on September 10th. You remember that wild 17-4 loss to the Red Sox at Camden Yards in that one, where Jordan Lyles was making his first start back from the stomach flu that kept him out of that Labor Day doubleheader game against the Blue Jays. And he came back and he just basically looked like he was still sick. If you remember in that game, the velocity was down as well to about 88 miles an hour. The location was not good. He was walking guys. His final line in that one was 3 2/3, 8 runs, 7 hits, a strikeout, a walk, and a homer allowed. It was his worst start of the season back on the 10th. And we really did think, all right, he was coming off the stomach bug. He thought he was fine. He clearly wasn't. He was, tired, and he just didn't have his stuff coming off being sick. And then he kind of pulled it together, and of course culminates with throwing the complete game, allowing just 1 run back on Wednesday night against the Tigers. So you think he's, complete game, he's fully back, even though it was against the worst offense in baseball in that Detroit team. But he comes back out there on Monday night, and the velo's down, and the location's bad, and he just looked tired. Again, something looked wrong, and I don't know if it's just arm fatigue here at the end of the season. I mean, Jordan Lyles is the one guy in this starting staff that is used to throwing this many innings. I mean, he's now thrown 172 innings this year. He threw 180 innings last year with the Rangers. This is why they got him, to eat innings and get somewhere close to 200 innings this season. And, he still could eclipse the 180 he threw last year, and he's been great eating these innings, but it's a little concerning. And, there is a chance that, obviously Jordan Lyles, unless he's injured, is going to start one more time this year. His rotation spot would theoretically come up again on Saturday, but because the season ends next Wednesday, he would not pitch after that. But there's a chance he could maybe start 2 more games. I mean, when you think about it, he only threw 37 pitches on Monday night. The Orioles have not named a starter for Thursday's game at this point. That is a day game. They can't use Grayson Rodriguez. He threw 89 pitches on Monday night for Norfolk. And they can't use Spenser Watkins now because he just threw 82 pitches on Monday night. So, you're not going to expect 100 pitches out of Jordan Lyles with just 2 days of rest, but he could start Thursday's game. You try and get 3 or 4 innings out of him, and then, go to maybe Mike Baumann or someone like that out of the bullpen. That's certainly a potential move the Orioles could make. And then if you do that, you give him his regular 4 days of rest, which is Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. And he starts the second to last game of the season next Tuesday at home against the Blue Jays. It's certainly something the Orioles could do, but you got to ask yourself, do they want to do that? Or do they just want to give him the full rest anyway and have him start on Saturday in New York and have that be his last start? Because he looked really tired and fatigued, and I hope all is good, and maybe he can bounce back and have 1 more good start or even 2 more good starts now. But It's a little concerning here at the end of the year that their innings eater looked that tired at the end of that start, which should not have been close to the end, because that was the second inning, and he was pitching like he was throwing his 150th pitch of the day, the way the ball was coming out of his hand. So just a little concerning, but something to monitor, and hopefully it's not an injury and he'll be back and good to go for, again, one and maybe two more starts this year. But speaking of Orioles pitching, they did make a roster move among their pitchers on Monday, and we saw the one move play a big part in this game. Logan Gillespie was activated and pitched 2 2/3 out of the bullpen. But to make room for him, the Orioles optioned Keegan Akin down to AAA. And it looks like, unless there's an injury, Akin will be done for the year. He won't be able to return to the major leagues. And what a weird year it was for Akin. He was dominant out of the bullpen in the first half, and then it all fell apart in the second half of the season. So I tried to do a look back on Akin's season and take a look at, was he really lucky in the first half? Was he really unlucky in the second half? Or did it fall somewhere in between? That's coming up next. So I wanted to finish up today's episode talking about the roster move that the Orioles made before Monday's game at Fenway Park. And, we heard that Bo Salser, Logan Gillespie, and Cam Gallagher were joining the Orioles on the taxi squad for this road trip to Boston and then to New York. And, the Orioles did have some injury issues, some things bugging some guys. Terrin Vavra is dealing with something. Adley Rutschman is a little sore. Ramon Arias, his back and neck still bothering him. And because of that, Brandon Hyde didn't put out a lineup until I think it was close to an hour before first pitch in Boston, just because he was checking on some guys' injuries. But they thought about, I think, making a move there, but they did make a move pitching-wise. And the right-hander Logan Gillespie was recalled from AAA Norfolk, and he was placed on the active roster. And to make room and just get another fresh reliever in the bullpen for the O's, who had to use relievers a lot on Saturday and Sunday, the O's option left-hander Keegan Akin down to AAA Norfolk. And because there's less than 15 days left in the season, and the new rule this year, if you're a pitcher option to AAA, you have to stay down for 15 days. Unless there's an injury on the Orioles active roster, if there is, Akin could replace that player. But if there's not an injury to a pitcher, Keegan Akin's 2022 is done. I mean, he goes to AAA Norfolk, but there's only 2 games left in Norfolk's season, today and tomorrow. He's probably not even going to join the Tide, so probably just kind of stay with the Orioles on the taxi squad in Boston and in New York, just won't be active and won't be able to pitch. But that's it for Keegan Akin's 2022. And I did really want to take a look at kind of what happened in Keegan Akin's season. Now, first, did want to just kind of update you on who the O's are getting in Logan Gillespie. Obviously, we've seen him for multiple stints before this season. The right-hander who the Orioles signed to a minor league contract in the middle of last year, liked his stuff so much that they sent him to the Arizona Fall League and then protected him from the Rule 5 draft, added him to the 40-man roster in the offseason. He hasn't been what the Orioles have expected at the big league level so far, but he's still been somewhat productive. In 13 appearances out of the Orioles bullpen this year in multiple stints in the big leagues, he's thrown 12 innings and has a 3.75 ERA. In those 12 innings, Gillespie has allowed 17 hits. He struck out 5, walked 2, hit a batter, and no home runs allowed. In his time in AAA with the Tides, obviously a bigger sample size, 22 appearances, 35 1/3 innings out of the Norfolk bullpen. He has a 5.09 ERA, which doesn't look great, but he has 38 strikeouts to just 9 walks and 2 homers allowed in 35 1/3 innings. It's just the 39 hits he's allowed in that time that have really hurt him. The strikeout to walk is an incredible number in AAA. He's still got the good stuff, high velocity fastball, really good changeup that falls off the table. Still working on a breaking ball, but he's kind of an end of the bullpen piece right now for the Orioles. But he replaces Keegan Akin, who of course did throw 27 pitches and kind of let the game get away in the Houston Astros 4-run top of the 11th, and the Orioles lost to the Astros on Sunday, and it continued to trend in the second half of the season for Keegan Akin. He was such a weapon for the Orioles bullpen in the first half, and that all just flipped on its head in the second half of the season. And assuming his 2022 is over, if there's not an injury to another Orioles pitcher and he replaces him, it'll be 42 appearances for Akin this season, 41 of them out of the bullpen. He made just that one spot start when Jordan Lyles got sick on Labor Day against the Blue Jays. And he posted a 3.40 ERA and a 3.78 FIP very respectable numbers for Akin in 76 and 2/3 innings of work. 8.3 Ks per nine. That was actually up about a half a strikeout from last season. 2.4 walks per nine. That was a big thing he worked on this offseason. His walks per nine down 1.5 from what was at times a disastrous 2021 for Akin. But he really improved on some things this year. 260 BABIP. He had a 0.3 WAR according to Fangraphs and about a 33% hard hit rate. And that was after a year last year where he was mostly as a starter and then pitched out of the bullpen, where he threw 95 innings and had a 6.63 ERA for the Orioles in 2021. I'll take an ERA drop of more than 3 runs. He almost sliced his ERA in half from 21 to 22. You will certainly take that. But when you dive further into Akin's numbers and you really split it up into the first half and the second half, it was a weird season for Keegan Akin. So let's start with the first half, because Akin made this opening day roster out of the Oriole bullpen and made it all the way to September 26th before being optioned to AAA, was on the roster the entire time. And to start the year, he was a big-time weapon for the Orioles bullpen. He would come in, he would pitch more than one inning pretty much every time, and he'd pitch, around 2 innings. He'd basically get, 4, 5, 6, sometimes 7 outs for the Oriole bullpen and kind of bridge the gap from the starters who weren't getting super deep into games, especially early in the year, to a back end of the bullpen that was really succeeding for the Orioles. And Akin was doing a great job bridging that gap. In the first half of the season, that's before the All-Star break, he threw 53 1/3 innings for the Orioles out of the bullpen. That was the most innings by any reliever in baseball at that point. And he had a 2.36 ERA. He had allowed just a 178 batting average by the opponents, about a 22% strikeout rate, just a 6% walk rate. The stuff looked good. And yeah, maybe he was getting a little lucky at times. I mean, a 35% hard hit rate. You're getting a little lucky. Balls weren't falling in. He had only a 186 BABIP. That's a batting average on balls in play. The league average is about 290. So if you're allowing a 186 BABIP, you're getting lucky at times. But the stuff still looked good. I did an episode back in May when Akin was just rolling along and really dove into the numbers and what Akin was doing better. And the big thing was he was just throwing way more strikes than he did in 2021. That was a key thing, but he was also hitting the edge of the zone better. His slider was playing much better. His fastball spin rate was up as well. He was getting a lot of swings and misses on the fastball, and all the stuff was better. Even the changeup was very improved when I did that episode. But looking into it, you go to the second half of the season and things just kind of fall apart for Keegan Akin. He wasn't used in nearly the same way he was in the first half. Now, it's not equal amount of games first and second half. It's usually 90 plus games in the first half. But remember, 53 1/3 innings in the first half of the season. He was on the roster the same amount of time the second half of the season. He only threw 23 1/3 innings after the All-Star break and pitched to a 5.79 ERA in that time. And remember, that ERA could easily be higher. He had a couple of games where there were some unearned runs scored against him, where they technically weren't earned runs because there was an error in the inning, but he certainly was getting hit hard. The one specifically I remember that crazy Friday night game at the Yard when the Orioles beat the Red Sox 15-10. Keegan Akin allowed 5 unearned runs in that game. You could argue that 3, maybe 4 of them should have been earned, and that would have hiked this ERA up towards 7 or 8 in the second half. But you look at the second half stats, again, a 319 batting average against him. It was under 180 in the first half. But here's the weird part. Strikeout rate got better in the second half. 21.5% in the first half, 25.7% in the second half. Walk rate basically stayed the same. 6.3% first half, 6.7% second half. That's basically no change. He didn't get hit as hard in the second half. 35% hard hit rate first half of the season, just a 29% hard hit rate in the second half of the season. But he got incredibly unlucky. If you're going to say he was lucky in the first half with that 186 BABIP, how about a 412 BABIP against Akin in the second half? That is absurd. Again, league average 290. Balls in play, falling in more than 40% of the time for a hit. That is ridiculous. So the question you have to try to answer, was he incredibly lucky in the first half? Was he incredibly unlucky in the second half? Or is neither half of the season really indicative of who he really is, and he's somewhere in the middle of those two pitchers that we saw. And when you're trying to find out, well, what happened in the second half, you can look to the pitches that really worked in the first half and didn't in the second half, specifically his slider. That thing was nasty in the first half of the season. Let me read out the batting average against Akin's slider for every month of the season. April, 111. May, 0. He did not give up a hit on his slider in all of May. He was pitching a good amount in that month. June, 111 batting average. July, 308. August, 421. September, only 125, but his slider was only put in play 5 times this month, so not a great sample size. The fastball, the same thing, averages all up. Even the changeup got hit harder and harder as the season went on, but the whiff rate actually got better on the slider as the season went on. So it's hard to tell. Now, one thing that StatCast can tell us is that the release point for Keegan Akin did change in the second half of the season. He dropped the arm down a little bit. The horizontal release, vertical release, both were significantly different from the first and second half. And that's certainly something you can see. A good example of that, Josh Hader was a dominant reliever. And then as soon as the Brewers traded him to the Padres this year, he couldn't get anybody out. He had like a 15 ERA in his first 10 appearances with the Padres. And people found out his release point had changed. And then they fixed that in San Diego. And now he's a little better and he's back into the Padres closer role. A similar thing, I think, may have happened to Keegan Akin, but it's not all release point because he's still getting good strikeout rates with this release point. He's still throwing strikes. His strike rate, his in-zone rate didn't go down at all. It just makes you think, was he just incredibly lucky in the first half of the season? Because it wasn't crazy strikeout numbers. And to have yourself get hit hard 35% of the time, and in those balls in play, only a 186 average by opposing hitters, it kind of tells you that Akin got out of a lot of jams with, a line drive hit right to third or a fly ball caught at the warning track. Those kind of plays were really helping Akin out in the first half. And then the second half, they all fell in and, some extra bloops fell in there as well. In conclusion, I don't think Akin's as good as he was in the first half. I don't think he's as bad as he was in the second half because he was terrible. I don't even think he's as bad as he was in 2021. I think he's better than that. I still think moving forward, he can be a major league piece of the Orioles bullpen. But what I think I've concluded, and it's not an amazing conclusion, but I feel like guys in the second half just kind of knew that he was throwing, 70+% of pitches in the strike zone. They just attacked him more. And I think he was just really, really lucky in the first half. Can you bottle that again? Can you change your delivery a little bit, change the pitches a little bit in the offseason and be back in the big league bullpen? Of course you can. They got plenty of team control on Keegan Akin. They can fix some of these things. I think he'll be in the big league bullpen at least for part of the season, potentially all the season next year. He was still a weapon at times. He's still a left-handed pitcher with a good fastball. But I just don't think the pitcher we saw in the first half is who Keegan Akin is. And it's unfortunate, but you dive into the numbers, I think he just had some really great luck, and all that luck fell apart and ended with some terrible numbers and him finishing the season in AAA Norfolk. So kind of an unfortunate end of the year for Akin, but his Orioles team in general trying to end this season on a positive note. They can lock up avoiding a losing season with a win tonight in Boston, game 2 of a 4-game series. Then I'll be back here with you tomorrow on the podcast. We'll recap game 2 between the Red Sox and the Orioles. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from that one. We'll continue to kind of do a little sidebar conversation on the game from the night before as well in these final, 9 or so games of the season. We'll continue all this Orioles talk as the O's continue to just barely, but hang around in this wild card race. But that's all coming up on tomorrow's episode. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.